أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So there's a bird trying to pull a worm out of the ground for its iftar. And one of three things can happen. Either the worm pulls out completely, or the worm breaks and becomes an instant shaheed, or the bird's beak hits proximal to the worm and deflects away, and the worm lives to see another day. And that's exactly how cracks operate inside composite materials, where the worm is a fiber, the environment is a material, and the bird is a crack. But let's take a step back. What exactly is a composite material? So if we put aside semiconductors, biomaterials, textiles, and fabrics, then materials can be broken down into three: metals, ceramics, and polymers. And where we have at least two of these with one distributed inside the other in the form of particles or fibers in order to enhance the overall properties, then that's what we call a composite material. And these materials are extremely tough. Let's take an example then of concrete, which has a very similar distribution to a chocolate chip cookie. So in concrete, which is made of cement and stones, the cement is like the cookie. It's known as the matrix, and it's responsible for deforming in order to accommodate stress. The stones, on the other hand, are a little bit like the chocolate chips. They're dispersed around. They're relatively hard and brittle, and their job is to reinforce the strength of the composite material. And it's this combination in this distribution that makes these materials extremely tough. And by tough, I mean they are resistant to cracks propagating through them. But what's interesting is that if we look at the toughness of cement and the toughness of stones, actually the toughness of concrete is far greater. It's greater than the sum of its parts. So how is this achieved? Well, if we think about the bird and the worm, so a crack coming through concrete will have to go through the cement, and before it gets to the stone, it has to pass the interface. And again, one of three things can happen. Either the stone pulls away, or the stone breaks, or the crack deflects away, and this time the stone lives to see another day. So you're probably wondering at this point, thank you for the introduction to composite materials, but what's the point of all this? So let's turn to Suratul Kahf, which is surah number 18 of the Holy Quran, verses 96 and 97, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how Dhul Qarnayn was instructed to build the wall to lock out Ya'juj and Ma'juj. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم آتوني زبر الحديد حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين قال انفخوا حتى إذا جعله نارا قال آتوني أفرغ عليه قطرا فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه وما استطاعوا له نقبا صدق الله العلي العظيم. In verse 96 it says, blocks of iron fill the gap between the two mountains. He said, blow, and when he made it as fire, he said, bring me molten copper to pour thereon. Verse 97 says, and Ya'juj and Ma'juj were unable to surmount it, nor could they pierce through it. And from this we can postulate or deduce the following. Number one, iron blocks dispersed in a copper matrix is a bimetallic composite material. And reference to a wall that can't be pierced through, well, you'd get through a wall by breaking it, introducing cracks and defects. That means 1400 years ago, the Quran was teaching us modern day material science, that composite materials are tough materials. Number two, iron is a very good reinforcement material because it's very strong. Copper, on the other hand, is relatively soft and ductile, and we said that's what the matrix needs to be. It's surrounding the iron. And therefore it can deform to accommodate stress. So if the wall was hit or there was an earthquake, it would be able to withstand that stress. Number three, we know that iron in the presence of moisture would rust, and that corrosion would lead to a degradation in strength of the wall. However, the iron is bound by the copper, and copper doesn't rust. Instead, it can corrode over time, but that would actually produce a further outer protective layer, which turns bluish and greenish over time, known as patina, which incidentally, if the wall was located somewhere in nature, then it would be pretty well camouflaged. Lastly, there's a mention of the iron blocks being heated as fire before the molten copper is introduced. And here's the thing, in 2021, scientists in China and Iran had a look at the effect of this and found actually it enhances the overall properties of these materials. In fact, just last year, researchers in North Africa and in the Middle East, including in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, had a look at what would be the most suitable range of temperatures in a series of publications where they coined this exact characterization, these sets of materials as Quranic Metal-Matrix Composites. So you see, this revelation isn't just one of historic, moral, legal, and linguistic miracles, but it is indeed, as you know, one of scientific miracles that we are still trying to analyze and decipher today. فَتَبَارَكَ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So glorious is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best of creators. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.